Hello and welcome to a new session. Today we talk about economic inequality. We have seen Sen's views on poverty and inequality. The understanding of poverty has changed over time, but the concept of inequality has never been disassociated from the concept of poverty. And the topics of poverty and inequality can never be disassociated from a course in development economics. In this section, we check some measures of inequality. Let us have a look at the objectives of the session. The first is to get an idea about inequality in economics. The second is to be able to classify the types of income distribution. The third is to be able to understand the measures of inequality. The fourth, to be able to understand inequality in real life. And the fifth is to be able to reason out the causes of inequality which we observe in real life. Let us now understand the meaning of economic inequality. Ray in 1998 describes that at the intrinsic level, economic inequality is the fundamental disparity that permits one individual certain material choices while denying another individual those very same choices. In the functional sense, inequality is the measurable disparity in the distribution of national income, assets and goods among different percentile groups of the population to an extent which drags down the rate of economic growth or does not allow the growth rate to rise. The inequality in distribution of national income or assets can be observed by understanding the distribution of income and assets between different population groups and whether these groups are sticky or fluid. That is, whether people can move from one income group and income category to another in the short run or in the long run. For example, if a worker enters the workforce at an income level of rupees 10,000 and remains in the same group for a long time, then it is called sticky income group. But if the worker can move from income level of rupees 10,000 to rupees 20,000 in the short run, then it is called fluid income group. If the worker can become a profit earner from a wage earner in the short run, then we can say that the mobility is possible between income categories. Hence, we must ask whether in a society the income group and the income categories are sticky or fluid and to what extent. The answer to this question will validate whether inequalities can be easily mitigated in a society or not. Another important observation which a society must make is with regards to the functional and personal distributions of income. Functional distribution of national income pertains to the proportionate distribution of national income as wages, salaries, interests and profits. The personal distribution pertains to the ways in which households receive their total incomes. For instance, one household may be earning wages from employment, but may also be the owner of a piece of land from which it earns a contractual income by renting it on contract farming. Ray explains this with the help of a flow chart. That can be seen on the screen. It is important to understand functional distribution of income, as an economy must know how its national income is earned. The way in which national income is earned also determines the future growth of the economy. Similarly, the source from which an individual earns incomes determines how an economy employs its people. The way an individual earns his or her income matters to him or her recognition and self-esteem. Sometimes people do not find jobs commensurate with their training, or they are forced to accept unsuitable or mucky jobs by the society, and hence they keep feeling unfulfilled. The source of income helps to understand the issue of inequality, as it is difficult for individuals to increase their incomes from some sources, while it may be easy to get richer easily if income is earned from certain types of sources. For instance, a wage earner may find it difficult to increase her wealth even by working very hard, as wages do not increase easily and wage jobs do not easily provide complementary earnings. But if an individual owns a piece of land, it is easier to get richer, as the rents tend to rise easily. Value of land usually appreciates faster than the value of labor. Let us see the criteria for measuring inequality. Prevalence of a high extent and high degree of inequality in any economy is a visible phenomenon. Look at the charts on the screen. We can easily observe the inequality in wealth distribution in India and the United States. We will now look at some applicable criteria in measuring inequality stated by Ray in the year 1998. The first is the anonymity principle. This principle states that individuals in a society may be ranked on the basis of their incomes from richest to the poorest. But in such a distribution, which individual ranks in which position is not important. It is the income rank which is important in understanding inequality and not the individual. For example, individual A may be at rank 5 and the individual B at rank 3, and later A may be at rank 7 and B may be on rank 2. It does not matter who the individual is. What matters is the income rank at rank 1 or 2 or 3 or so on. The change in position of an individual does not signify inequality, though his or her personal well-being does get affected. The second is the population principle and the relative income principle. The population size does not matter in measuring inequality. It is the proportion of income that goes to a population size which matters in understanding inequality. A particular population size may be big or small. Its relative poverty is determined not by total number of people and the total income, but by the proportion of income received from the total income of the economy. For example, let there be a total income which is rupees 1 lakh, which is to be shared in a total population size of 10,000. Now, one size X of the population, which constitutes 40% of the total population, receives only 15% of the total income to share among them. We can state this in absolute number that 4,000 people receive a share of rupees 15,000 as a whole group. Now, if the population size doubles to 2n and the national income doubles to rupees 2 lakhs and the group X, which is the 40% of the population, still receives 15% of the total income, then inequality is the same as before. Income distribution is said to improve if the percentage of total income going to a proportion of population increases. Hence, proportion of population matters and not the size of population or the number of people. And in measuring inequality, the relative distribution of income matters and not the absolute income. For instance, the inequality of income between incomes of two persons as rupees 1,000 and rupees 3,000 respectively is the same as that of rupees 2,000 and rupees 6,000. Take a careful look at the graphs which are on the screen now. Graph 1 here shows the population principle, where we show percentage of population in various income ranges. The second graph here shows the relative income earned by different percentile groups of population. The third to understand is the Dalton principle. This principle is called the Pigou-Dalton principle. Pigou in the year 1912 and Dalton in the year 1920. According to this principle, a transfer of income from the not richer to the not poorer individuals is a regressive transfer and it increases inequalities. If income distribution B is derived from income distribution A by making a series of regressive transfers, then B is more unequal distribution than A. For example, in a society of 4 individuals with income distribution as A is equal to 50, 100, 400, 700. If we transfer rupees 25 from the first person, the second person, then it is regressive transfer and the distribution is now B is equal to 25, 125, 400, 700. Now, if we transfer rupees 150 from the fourth person to the third person in the initial distribution, then it is progressive transfer and the distribution thus obtained is C is equal to 50, 100, 550, 550. Let us make regressive and progressive transfers simultaneously in the initial distribution to obtain distribution. D is equal to 25, 125, 550, 550. Now, draw Lorentz curves for the initial distribution and this distribution and compare distributions A and D for inequality. Limitation of Lorentz curve in expressing inequality. We have learnt from Lorentz curve in one of our earlier lectures. It is only a picture and does not quantify inequality. If two Lorenz curves cross each other, then the inequality of the two income distributions cannot be ranked. Look at the picture on the screen. In this picture, there are two Lorenz curves, L1 and L2, crossing over each other, and hence we cannot explain the Dalton principle by making regressive transfers. There must be both progressive and regressive transfers simultaneously ingoing from one curve to another. Now let us look at some quantitative measures of inequality. The first one is range. It is the difference between the incomes of the rich and the poor divided by mean of the income distribution. Let us take a note that when we divide it by the mean, it represents the average range of difference between the rich and the poor, and at the same time becomes independent of the units in which income is measured. Range R is equal to 1 upon mu into Ym minus Y1, where Ym is the highest income class, Y1 is the lowest income class. Mu is equal to mean of income distribution, which is given as where 1 to m are the income classes in the entire distribution. Nj is the total number of individuals in the income class j, and Yj is the income of the income class j. However, this measure pays no attention to the people between the highest and the lowest incomes. This measure can also not satisfy Dalton principle, because if some transfers are made from the second poorest individual to the second richest individual, then range will remain unchanged, while according to Dalton principle, the inequality must increase. The second is the Kuznets ratio. Simon Kuznets gave these ratios to explain the proportion of total income share received by the richest 10% and the poorest 20% or 40%. In a way, these ratios serve as a means to express the Lorenz curve. The third is the mean absolute deviation. According to this measure, the average distance of actual incomes from the mean income is considered to be inequality. The mean deviation is equal to, as you can see the formula on the screen. We take sum of all the individual incomes deviations from the mean income and divide it by the total income. Modulated values are taken to avoid the negative differences. Total income can also be taken as mu n, that is average income multiplied by number of persons. In this distribution, if there is an income yk which is below the mean income and yj which is above the mean income, then any transfer from yk to yj will prove the Dalton principle as the inequality shown by mean deviation will increase by such a regressive transfer. But if there are two individual incomes yi and yj above the mean such that yi is less than yj, then any transfer from yi to yj which is regressive will not be reflected in mean deviation if it is a transfer of small amount, as there will be no difference in the sum of absolute difference from the mean. Thus, the Dalton principle cannot be applied. The fourth one is the coefficient of variation. If larger weight is assigned to the deviation from the mean, then any regressive transfer on any one side of the mean will have a significant impact on the deviation values. Hence, if we square the deviations, this weight automatically increases, and any regressive transfer even on one side of the mean will be reflected. The measure of standard deviation does this. The formula for the standard deviation can be seen on the screen. The coefficient of variation is then given as the measure of coefficient of variation shows inequalities in Lorentz curve. It is Lorentz consistent. It also satisfies the Dalton principle in all types of regressive transfers. The fifth one is the Gini coefficient. The Gini coefficient is a widely used measure of inequality. It takes the difference between all pairs of incomes and simply totals the absolute differences. It thus expresses inequality as the sum of income differences between all conceivable pairs of incomes. All such differences are divided by n square, because when all such pairs are added, there are n raised to powers 2 such pairs. The formula for the Gini coefficient, which is reflected as G, can be seen on the screen now. The Gini coefficient is also Lorentz consistent and satisfies the Dalton principle like the coefficient of variation. We have already seen the expression of Gini ratio in one of our earlier lectures. Take a quick and careful look at the table on the screen, which gives Gini coefficient for various countries. It is time to summarize today's session. In this session, we have seen the various criteria for measuring inequality and the various measures of inequality. We must remember the criteria for measuring inequality, the Dalton principle, and the formulae for various tools which help in measuring inequality. With this, we wind up today's session. Thank you for joining.